And it's not just politicians in the US that are uninspiring these days. In this week's magazine, Douglas Murray lambasts the culture of can-kicking that British politics has got itself into. We seem to be report-heavy and action-light, he writes. So, Douglas, welcome back to Spectator TV. It seems in your column this week that there are two problems you're picking up on. First is this culture of just commissioning reports and then not really doing anything with them. And the second is what's happening with the prevent strategy and how we can fix it. Can we talk about that first one first? What is this culture that British politics has got itself into where there are just millions of reports but nothing ever gets done?
Yes, it's very strange. I say in my column this week that you could argue it started with the coalition government from 2010 to 2015. Where the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats, had a lot they didn't agree on. The easiest way to not upset Nick Clegg, which was obviously in those years, as we know, the absolute priority of the UK, was to kick things into commissions, inquiries, reports, judicial overviews of things. That way, effectively, you didn't have to decide anything. Remember, for instance, that the energy problems that we have in our country at the moment could actually be remedied if it wasn't for the fact that that coalition government just endlessly sort of kicked things into the long grass, into reporting stages. I mean, I wrote about this recently, but, and I don't sound like I am picking on him, but, well, I am. But Nick Clegg said at the beginning of the coalition, if we did this new nuclear reactor, the energy wouldn't even come online until like 2022, 2023. I mean, wow, who could expect such a date to ever arrive? And actually, it turns out, we could have done with decisions being made on our energy at that point. We could have done with questions like that in the national interest, not just being endlessly farmed out to commissions, to reports, to inquiries, and so on. But somehow that became the culture in Whitehall. And even when the Conservatives got a majority in 2015, that culture continued. I give the example in the column of the Louise Casey review that looked into the problems of integration in the UK. I admire Louise Casey very much. I spoke to her when she was doing that review. And a fine piece of work it is. But effectively, the government said, thank you very much for delivering your report, and then shelved it. Nothing has happened so far as I can see. I've seen no deliverables, to use one of the ugly terms of government, about the Casey review. And you can just see that in case after case. We've ended up with this sort of government situation where something happens and they say something must be done. And the something is a report that will report at some point in the coming years, and then we don't have to listen to it.
Well, to be fair, I mean, just going back to Nick Clegg, maybe he already knew that he wouldn't be in Westminster for another 10 years.
Yes, it seemed like an implausibly long timeline for him.
And just on these reports, then, do you think the problem is that there's no legal or moral, political obligation for governments to act on these reports once they're commissioned and published? As you say, they can just be shelved. Or is it that the reports themselves are often not the right solution? They don't identify the problems?
Well, there shouldn't be. I mean, you can't commission a report and then say it's going to be legally binding, or a commission of inquiry and say it's got to be legally binding. I mean, that would be even more impossible. No, I think the problem is just that there is no political will to make decisions. The fact is that when certain decisions come across a Prime Minister's desk or a Home Secretary's desk, they just have to make the decision one way or the other. And as I say, somehow we've got stuck in this culture which is, it's just easier to farm it out. It's easier to kick the can along the road. Like, why? To get on to the second part of what we're discussing, the prevent issue. Like, why, after the 3 terrorist attacks in 2017, including the London Bridge attack, or London Bridge 1 as it became known, why did Theresa May need to say enough is enough? Okay, sure, like nobody loved seeing schoolgirls blown up at a concert in Manchester. Okay, great, enough is enough. What are you going to do about it, Prime Minister? I'm going to appoint a commissioner to look into the question of extremism and then work on it for years. What happened? I admire Sarah Khan, who was actually appointed as commissioner. But what happens is the Prime Minister says, all these people have been killed in British cities, in London and Manchester. And as a result, I'm going to commission an eminently, suitable figure to look into the problem of extremism. What happens? That person takes years to, for instance, at the beginning, define what extremism might be. When the London Bridge attackers were slitting people's throats on London Bridge in 2017, I imagine, I don't want to speak for them obviously or try to, but I imagine that they'd have been surprised if they thought that the response to this by government would be a hermeneutical inquiry into the nature of the term extremism, or a request to academics across the UK to send in academic papers about areas to do with extremism and radicalisation within the UK. And then for that to go on for years and years. It's just not, it's not a way to govern. It's a weak way to govern, sure. And that's what Theresa May demonstrated then, just as some of her predecessors had. And that's what I worry about with the issue, which is sort of the culmination point I tried to make in the column this week.
Yes, well, let's bring in that report, because there's another report stuck in the Whitehall pipes at the moment, all about extremism and terrorism. Tell us about the Shawcross report.
Yes, in the wake of the 7/7 bombings way back in 2005, the Blair government instituted the PREVENT strategy. It was intended to address issues of de-radicalisation, of radicalisation, to try to identify people who might be of interest, as it were, just before they come to the interest of the security services or the police. It was highly controversial, particularly within the Muslim community, because a lot of Muslim community leaders said, you're targeting the Muslim community and much more. And there has been a massive amount of disinformation pumped out about PREVENT by primarily so-called leaders in the Muslim community who have terrified the Muslim community into what this actually means. The PREVENT strategy has metastasized over the years. Again, rather like the Sarah Khan report, you get this thing of sort of, well, it's unfair just to look into the people who are doing suicide bombings. Why don't we look into other types of extremism as well? And I give an example in the article that by now, PREVENT actually, and you've probably got the quote in front of you, Cindy, it's worth reading out that definition, if I can ask you, if I haven't got it in front of me. One of the definitions of extremism of PREVENT.
Of cultural nationalism as the ideology, which is a belief that Western culture is under threat from mass migration into Europe and from a lack of integration by certain ethnic and cultural groups. And that is one of the ideologies that they are tackling as problematic.
So PREVENT now, or in recent years, has both covered, as it were, the victim of terrorism and the terrorist in the same smorgasbord of allegations. If you're the young man who left a bomb on the underground train at Parsons Green a few years ago, an illegal migrant who shouldn't have been in the UK and made a bomb and left it on a train, if you're that, then you're a subject of interest to PREVENT. But also, if, say, you were one of the people on that train at Parsons Green that morning who thought, hey, I'm not that cool about people just walking into my country, making bombs and leaving them on my underground train in the morning, well, you're also a potential subject of interest to PREVENT. And that has been the problem of PREVENT, the metastasizing of it. So the Boris Johnson government, remember him, commissioned a review into PREVENT. Perfectly suitable to do it. William Shawcross, the former head of the Charity Commission, a very distinguished author and public servant, was asked to do the review. It was delivered last summer when Priti Patel was Home Secretary. Remember her? This is how long ago we're talking about in all these processes. The reports continue, the inquiries continue, but prime ministers and home secretaries come and go. It was delivered last summer, and it is meant to be released fairly soon. But there's just been this blockage in the system because the system is busily debating the report that the system had asked for, and we're no closer to addressing any of the questions than we were when Boris Johnson first commissioned Shawcross.
Douglas, I wonder if you've seen this reporting that I saw about why there's a hold-up, which is that the Home Office has advised some redactions of names of groups and individuals in this report, and the reporting seemed to be that Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, is taking those redactions, whereas Michael Gove is pushing back and saying that we need these names out there. I don't know if that is how accurate that is to what is happening behind the scenes, but it seems bizarre that Braverman, isn't she meant to be a bit of a bulldog in defence of British values and very tough on terrorism?
If the reporting is true, it's very disappointing about the Home Secretary, very disappointing indeed. Yes, the report has been in the system so long now that there has been significant briefing of the report.
We all know what it says.
Yes, I mean, it's been leaked to every paper from the Telegraph to the Guardian in segments by obviously officials in the Home Office, many of whom will be worried about the Prevent review, because they'll be worried about the end of the boondoggle of massive spigots of public spending that reassure them that they can spend their days sitting at a desk, chewing a pen, pretending to worry about what definition of extremism we should use in the UK, and so on. But anyway, there's been lots of leaks. One of the leaks, as you say, is that there is this hold-up. It would be very, very disturbing if it was the case that the Home Secretary or anyone else in government was worried, genuinely worried about the naming of individuals in this report. And it comes back to the source of the problem. What the hell is the point of commissioning work looking into serious problems when in the end of the process, and at the end of the process, officials are worried about upsetting the feelings of extremists, actual extremists, Islamists in the UK? What the hell is the point of all of these reports where even when you get to the point in question, you end up with officials saying, well, we can't upset the Islamists, can we? What an awful thing that would be.
Douglas Murray, thank you for joining Spectator TV.
Great pleasure as always.